The stars had always called to humanity. For 800 years, they had answered that call, spreading across 12 star systems like seeds carried on a cosmic wind. It was not much compared to the ancient empires that ruled the galaxy. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of 47 spacefaring species, had existed for over 10,000 years. To them, humans were babies taking their first steps. They were interesting, perhaps. But not important? Commander Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel. Starward dawn and watched the stars streak past the viewport. She was 43 years old, with short brown hair turning gray at the temples and eyes that had seen too much emptiness between worlds. Her crew of 60 trusted her completely. She had earned that trust through 15 years of keeping them, live in the dangerous spaces between known systems. Her second in command, Lieutenant Danny Reyes, approached with a tablet in his hands. He was younger than her by 10 years, with the kind of face that smiled easily. But he was not smiling now. "Commander, we picked up a distress signal," he said. "It is coming from Horizon 4. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. Horizon 4 was a small colony, barely 5 years old. 3,000 people lived there, mostly farmers and scientists studying the local ecosystem. They had no military presence. They had no enemies. "How old is the signal?" she asked. 6 hours. "We are the closest vessel." Lisa did not hesitate. "Change course. Maximum speed." Starward Dawn was not a warship. It carried only light defensive weapons and a small security team. But it was fast, and Lisa pushed its engines beyond their recommended limits. They arrived at Horizon 4 in 4 hours instead of 6. What they found would haunt Lisa for the rest of her life. The colony was burning. Great pillars of smoke rose from shattered buildings. The landing fields were covered with debris. Bodies lay in the streets, some of them very small. The attack had come without warning, without mercy, without reason. Danny's voice shook as he read the sensor data. "Commander, I am detecting no life signs in the main settlement. But there are some survivors in the northern caves. Maybe 200 people." Lisa took a shuttle down herself. She walked through the ruins with her security team, stepping around the dead, trying not to look at their faces. The smell of smoke and death filled her lungs. She had seen tragedy before. She had lost friends to the cold vacuum of space and the dangers of unexplored worlds. But this was different. This was murder on a scale she could not comprehend. In the caves, she found the survivors. They were terrified, huddled together in the darkness. An old man named Henry came forward to meet her. His clothes were torn and his face was bloody, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. "The Vectari," he said. "They came without warning. Their ships filled the sky. They killed everyone they could find, and they took prisoners. 200 people, Commander. They took them as slaves." Lisa knew of the Vectari Dominion. Everyone did. They were a powerful empire that had conquered 17 species over the centuries. They viewed other races as resources to be exploited, but they had never attacked humanity before. There had been no conflict, no dispute, no reason for this slaughter. "Why?" Lisa asked. "Why would they do this?" Henry shook his head. "I heard one of their soldiers talking. He said humans would make excellent servants. He said we were new to the galaxy and had no one to protect us." He was laughing, Commander. They were all laughing. Lisa helped the survivors onto her ship. She sent a message to Earth Command attaching all the sensor data, all the evidence of what had happened. Then she set course for Nexus Prime, the neutral station where the Galactic Concord held its meetings. Someone had to answer for this. Ambassador Kira Santos met her at the docking bay. Kira was in her 50s. A career diplomat who had spent her life trying to build bridges between humanity and the older species. She had achieved much in her career. She had negotiated trade agreements, resolved disputes, and earned respect from races that usually ignored newcomers. But as Lisa told her what had happened, Kira's face grew pale. "The Council will not act," Kira said quietly. "I know them. The Vectari are too powerful, too valuable as trading partners. We are too new, too weak. They will express sympathy and do nothing." "And make them act," Lisa said. 3,000 people are dead. 200 more are in chains somewhere. Children, Kira. They took children. Kira went before the Council of Elders. She spoke with passion and precision. She showed them the evidence of the massacre. She pleaded for justice, for intervention, for anything that might save the prisoners. The ancient races listened politely. Then they dismissed her concerns. The Thessary representative, a tall being with silver skin, spoke for the council. We are sorry for your loss, Ambassador. But the internal affairs of the Vectari Dominion are not our concern. Your species is young. You will learn that the galaxy operates on certain realities. The strong do as they wish. The weak endure. Kira returned to Lisa with empty hands and a breaking heart. But Lisa had not waited for the Council's decision. She had already sent her message to Earth Command. It contained only 4 words. They took our people. Response came within hours. Every human vessel in the sector changed course. Ships that had been exploring distant stars turned toward Vectari space. Trade vessels suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Sleeper agents who had lived peacefully on Vectari worlds for years received activation codes. Admiral George Palmer took command of the assembled fleet. He was 70 years old, a veteran of the solar wars that had nearly destroyed humanity 2 centuries ago. He had hoped to retire in peace. Instead, he found himself preparing for a conflict that could end his species entirely. He sent a message to the Vectari High Command. It was simple and clear. Return the prisoners within 72 hours. All of them, unharmed, or face the consequences. The Vectari laughed at the ultimatum. Their High Commander, a brutal warrior named Threk, broadcast his response to the entire galaxy. The humans threaten us. They have barely 300 warships. We have thousands. They are children playing at war. We will teach them their place. The 72 hours passed slowly. Human families across 12 star systems held their breath. Prayers were spoken in 100 languages. Candles were lit for the dead and the taken. No prisoners were returned. Admiral Palmer received the news in silence. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the stars that humanity had worked so hard to reach. Then he gave the order that would change galactic history. All units, he said, begin the offensive. No mercy, no retreat. We get our people back, or we die trying. The first human ships crossed into Vectari space, exactly 72 hours and 1 minute after the ultimatum was delivered. The Vectari expected a skirmish, small battle that would teach the upstart species a lesson. They did not understand what they had. Awakened, the Vectari had conquered 17 species. They had fought wars that lasted centuries. They understood military strategy better than most races in the galaxy. They knew how civilized beings waged war. There were rules, patterns, logical approaches. You attacked supply lines. You targeted military installations. You negotiated when the cost became too high. War was a calculation, balancing of gains and losses. Humans did not follow the rules. On the first day of the conflict, the Vectari expected a concentrated assault on their border stations. Instead, they found chaos. Human vessels appeared everywhere at once, striking targets across their entire territory. Trade ships that had been peaceful for years opened fire on military patrols. Cargo vessels rammed themselves into weapons factories. Civilian transports filled with explosives crashed into communication towers. Captain Marcus Webb piloted his small frigate, the Defiant Hope, through the heart of Vectari space. His ship was barely armed, designed for scouting and light escort duty. It had no business being anywhere near enemy territory. But Marcus had volunteered the moment he heard about Horizon the Fourth. His sister had lived on that colony with her husband and 2 children. He had found their names on the list of the dead. His target was Chronos Station, the largest shipyard in the Vectari Dominion. Over 200 warships were being built there at any given time. It was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital weapons platforms and patrol fleets. No sane military commander would attack it with a single frigate. Marcus was not interested in sanity. He broadcast one message as he approached the station. This is for Horizon 4. This is for my sister. This is for every human you murdered. The Vectari defenders tried to stop him. They hit his ship with everything they had. The Defiant Hope lost its shields, its weapons, its engines. But momentum carried it forward. Marcus stayed at the helm until the very end, guiding his dying ship directly into the station's main reactor. The explosion destroyed Kronos Station completely. 200 warships under construction were lost. The shockwave damaged every vessel within 1,000 kilometers. Marcus Webb died instantly, but he took 50,000 Vectari with him, across the galaxy. The ancient races watched in horror. The Zephyri, a species dedicated to recording history, began documenting what they called the human fury. Their scholars noted something they had never seen before in any species. Humans did not fight to win. They fought to hurt. They did not calculate acceptable losses, because they did not accept any losses. When someone took their people, something broke inside them. Logic disappeared. Survival instinct faded. Only the need to strike back remained. Lieutenant Commander Beth Taylor led a ground assault on the slave markets of Vectari Prime. Intelligence had located 40 human prisoners there, being prepared for auction. Beth had 40 Marines under her command. They faced over 2,000 Vectari soldiers defending the market. The battle lasted 19 hours. Beth had trained her entire adult life for combat. She had fought pirates and raiders in the outer colonies. She had survived situations that should have killed her many times. But nothing had prepared her for what she experienced on Vectari Prime. Her Marines fought without rest. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they picked up Vectari rifles. When those failed, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. They advanced through a storm of enemy fire, leaving dead Vectari in their wake. Every time Beth thought they had reached their limit, they found more strength. The prisoners were counting on them. They could not fail. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found Beth standing in the central market square. Her armor was shattered. Her left arm was broken. She had taken 3 gunshot wounds and was still bleeding from a dozen cuts. Around her lay the bodies of Vectari soldiers. Behind her stood the 40 prisoners, freed from their chains. Protected by the surviving Marines, she had lost only 3 of her people in 19 hours of constant fighting. The rescue team leader approached her carefully. "Commander Taylor, you need medical attention immediately." Beth shook her head. "Not until everyone is safe on the ships. The prisoners first, then my wounded, then me." She collapsed 5 minutes later, after personally ensuring that every freed human was aboard the evacuation vessels. The Vectari High Command began to understand their mistake. They had expected a conventional war with a weaker opponent. They had assumed humans would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They had believed that threats and displays of power would break human morale. Instead, every act of violence only made humans angrier. High Commander Threk ordered his forces to make examples of captured human soldiers. He thought that broadcasting their executions would terrify humanity into submission. The opposite happened. For every human killed, 10 more volunteered to fight. Ships that had no business joining a war crossed into Vectari space. Scientists abandoned their research to build weapons. Teachers left their classrooms to train as soldiers. An entire species mobilized with a fury that defied all logic. Admiral Palmer received reports from every front. The war was only 3 days old, and already humanity had lost thousands of lives. Their ships were outnumbered. Their technology was inferior. By every reasonable measure, they should have been losing, but they were not losing. They were advancing. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Vectire have requested a ceasefire. They want to negotiate." Palmer did not look up from his tactical display. "What are their terms?" "They offered to release half the prisoners in exchange for an end to hostilities. They say the other half will be released after we pay compensation for the damage we have caused." Palmer finally raised his eyes. His face was calm, but his voice carried a cold edge that made everyone on the bridge shiver. "Tell them our terms remain unchanged. All prisoners. All of them. Immediately. Or we continue until there is nothing left of their empire." "Sir, they will not accept that." Their pride will not allow it. Then their pride will kill them. Palmer turned back to his display. Signal all units. We do not stop. We do not slow down. We get our people back, every single one of them, or we tear the Dominion apart piece by piece. The Vectari had made one critical miscalculation. They had studied human history. They had seen the wars humans fought against each other, the terrible weapons they built, the destruction they caused. They had assumed this made humans dangerous but predictable. They had not understood the difference. Humans fought each other over territory, resources, and ideology. Those wars eventually ended because both sides grew tired. Both sides wanted to survive. Both sides could be reasoned with. But this war was different. The Vectari had not taken territory or resources. They had taken people. They had murdered children and enslaved the survivors. They had touched something that humans valued more than their own lives. There would be no negotiation. There would be no compromise. There would be no end until every prisoner was free and every debt was paid in blood. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. And watching from the safety of their distant worlds, the other great powers began to feel something they had not experienced in centuries. Fear. The galactic concord had existed for over 10,000 years. In that time, its member species had witnessed countless wars. The rise and fall of empires, and the extinction of races too stubborn or too weak to survive. They had developed a comfortable certainty about how the universe worked. The strong dominated the weak. Resources determined power. Logic governed behavior. These were the rules that everyone followed. Humanity was rewriting those rules. On the neutral station of Nexus Prime, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what they were witnessing. The war between humanity and the Vectari Dominion was only 2 weeks old. But it had already become the most talked-about event in living memory. News feeds across the galaxy showed footage of human ships charging into overwhelming enemy fire. Stories spread of human soldiers fighting until their last breath, rather than surrendering. Rumors circulated about weapons that should not exist, tactics that defied military doctrine, and a rage that seemed to have no limit. The Thesari were among the most ancient and respected races in the Concord. They were telepaths, able to sense the thoughts and emotions of other beings. Their leader, Elder Vorath, had lived for nearly 1,000 years and had touched the minds of countless species. Nothing had prepared him for humans. He addressed the emergency council with visible unease. I attempted to read human minds during my diplomatic mission to their homeworld. I wished to understand their motivations, to find some logic behind their actions. What I found was something I cannot easily describe. The other representatives leaned forward with interest. Human consciousness is chaos, Vorath continued. It is a storm of contradictions. They are capable of tremendous love and terrible violence, often at the same time. They form bonds with each other that transcend reason. A human will sacrifice everything, including their own life, for a person they have never met, simply because that person is also human. They call each other family even when they share no blood. They feel the pain of strangers as if it were their own. A colliery merchant spoke up. So they are irrational. That makes them dangerous but predictable. They will exhaust themselves eventually. Vorath shook his head slowly. You do not understand. Their irrationality is their strength. They do not calculate acceptable losses, because they do not accept any losses. Every death makes them angrier. Every atrocity gives them more reason to fight. The Vectari thought they could break human morale through violence. Instead, they have united an entire species against them. On a research station deep in human space, Dr. Nathan Cole worked around the clock to support the war effort. He was a cryptographer, a specialist in breaking enemy codes and communications. For 2 weeks, he and his team had been trying to crack Vectari encryption. The enemy used a system that had remained unbroken for centuries. It should have taken years to defeat. Nathan solved it in 14 days. He barely slept during that time. His wife sent messages begging him to rest, but he could not stop. His nephew had been on the horizon for when the attack came. The boy was only 12 years old. He was among the prisoners taken by the Vectari. Every hour that Nathan spent sleeping was an hour his nephew spent in chains. When the encryption finally broke, Nathan felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Only exhaustion and the cold determination to keep working. He sent the decoded data to Admiral Palmer immediately. It contained the location of every prison camp, every slave market, every facility where human captives were being held. Rescue operations launched within hours. Meanwhile, the Vectari attempted to rally allies against the human threat. High Commander Threk sent diplomats to every major power in the region. He offered favorable trade terms, military alliances, and shared intelligence. He painted humanity as a danger to galactic stability that needed to be contained before it was too late. No one accepted his offers. The Kalor Syndicate was famous for selling weapons to anyone with enough credits. They had supplied both sides in countless wars throughout history. But when Vectari representatives approached them, the Syndicate's leader, calculating merchant named Thros, refused to meet with them. "We deal with reasonable species," Thros explained to his advisors. "Species that understand profit and loss, that can be negotiated with, that will stop fighting when the cost becomes too high. Humans are not reasonable. They do not care about cost. They will spend their last ship and their last soldier to avenge their fallen. Any species that trades with the Vectari now will become a target of that fury. We are merchants, not fools." Similar calculations happened across the galaxy. The Makari, a species of pure logic, ran probability models on human behavior. Their computers predicted human actions based on historical data and cycle. Logical analysis. The models failed repeatedly. Humans did not behave according to rational self-interest. They made choices that guaranteed their own destruction if it meant hurting their enemies. The Makari concluded that engaging with humanity in any hostile capacity was statistically inadvisable. Back in Vectari space, the war continued to turn against the Dominion. Human forces struck targets with perfect accuracy, using intelligence from Nathan's decoded data. Prison camps that had held captives for weeks were suddenly liberated. Slave markets that had operated for centuries were destroyed overnight. The Vectari could not understand how humans knew where to strike. High Commander Threk grew desperate. His empire was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. His allies had abandoned him. His people were beginning to question whether the war was worth fighting. He needed something to break the human spirit, to show them that resistance was futile. He ordered the execution of prisoners. The broadcasts would be sent across all human communication channels. The Vectari would show humanity what happened to those who defied the Dominion. They would kill captives one by one until humans agreed to surrender. It was the worst decision Threk ever made. The first execution broadcast lasted 47 seconds before human cyber forces shut it down. In that brief time, 14 prisoners were killed. Among them were soldiers, civilians, and children. The footage showed them facing their deaths with courage, refusing to beg, refusing to show fear. The youngest victim was a 7-year-old girl named Sophie. Her father, Chief Engineer Paul Harrison of the Starward Dawn, watched the broadcast from the engineering bay of his ship. He saw his daughter die with her head held high, defiant to the end. Paul Harrison did not cry. He did not scream. He simply turned away from the screen and walked to his workbench. For the next 48 hours, he did not sleep, did not eat, did not speak to anyone. He worked with a focus that frightened everyone who saw him. When he finally emerged, he carried a small device in his hands. It was a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever created. It destabilized quantum bonds at the molecular level, causing matter to simply fall apart. The physics should not have allowed such a thing to exist. Scientists would later study Paul's design and fail to understand how he had built it. He had built it with rage. He had built it with grief. He had built it with the love of a father who had nothing left to lose. Admiral Palmer looked at the device and understood what it represented. It was the end of the war, one way or another. It was vengeance made solid, grief transformed into power. "Can we deliver it to their homeworld?" Palmer asked.
"Oh, yes,"
Paul replied. His voice was empty of emotion. "But whoever delivers it will not survive. Palmer nodded slowly. He had expected as much. I will ask for volunteers. He did not need to ask. Commander Lisa Morgan was already standing at the door, her crew behind her. They had heard everything through the open communication channel. We will take it, Lisa said. The Starward Dawn started this journey on Horizon 4. We will end it on Vectari Prime. Her crew did not hesitate. Every single one of them stepped forward, knowing they were stepping toward their deaths. Danny Reyes smiled his easy smile for the last time. Beth Taylor, still recovering from her wounds, stood straight and proud. Engineers, medics, pilots, and Marines all volunteered together. They were going home to save their people. They just would not be coming back. The Starward Dawn made its final jump into Vectari space on a cold morning by Earth time. Commander Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge, surrounded by her crew, watching the stars blur and stretch as they crossed the boundary between normal space and the unknown. None of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Danny Reyes had recorded a message for his mother the night before. He told her about his childhood, about the summers they spent by the ocean, about the stories she used to tell him before bed. He told her he was not afraid. He told her that protecting innocent people was worth any price. He asked her not to cry for too long. Beth Taylor had written letters to the families of the 3 Marines she lost on Vectari Prime. She apologized for not bringing their loved ones home. She promised that their sacrifice would mean something. She sealed the letters and left them in her quarters. Knowing someone would find them after, Paul Harrison sat alone in the engineering bay, next to the weapon he had built. He did not think about technical details or quantum physics. He thought about Sophie. He remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle on the grassy fields of Horizon 4. He remembered her laughter when she finally balanced on her own, pedaling away from him with her hair flying in the wind. He remembered her face on the execution broadcast, brave and unbroken until the very end. The weapon hummed softly beside him. It would destroy everything within range. It would end the war. It would avenge his daughter. It would not bring her back. Lisa called the crew to the bridge as they approached. Vectari Prime. The enemy homeworld filled the viewport. A massive sphere of blue and green, surrounded by orbital platforms and defense stations. The entire Vectari home fleet had gathered to protect it. Over 800 warships formed a wall of metal and weapons between the Starward Dawn and its target. Against them stood a single exploration vessel with no military weapons and a crew of 54 volunteers. They are hailing us, Danny reported. High Commander Threk wants to speak with you personally. Lisa considered refusing. There was nothing the Vectari could say that would change what was about to happen, but something in her wanted them to understand. She wanted Threk to know exactly why his empire was about to fall. Put him through, she said. Threk's face appeared on the main screen. He was a large being, covered in dark scales, with eyes that burned with cold fury. He had commanded armies and conquered worlds. He had never been defeated in battle. He looked at Lisa with contempt. Commander Morgan, he said, you have brought a single ship against my entire fleet. Is this human arrogance or human stupidity? Lisa smiled. It was not a warm smile. Neither. This is human justice. Justice. Threk laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. You have no power here. You are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Surrender now, and I will grant your crew a quick death. Continue this foolishness, and I will make you watch as we destroy every human colony in the galaxy. Lisa leaned forward slightly. You killed our children, Threk. You murdered innocent people and sold survivors into slavery. You thought we were weak because we were new. You thought we would accept your cruelty because we had no choice. You were wrong, she gestured to Paul, who stepped forward. The weapon in his hands caught the light, its surface seeming to swallow brightness rather than reflect it. This is what happens when you hurt our people, Lisa continued. This is what we build when you take our children. This is the price you pay for thinking you could touch us without consequences. Threk's expression changed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. What is that device? The end of your fleet. The end of your power. The end of everything you built. Lisa stood tall, her voice steady. We cannot be broken, Threk. We cannot be frightened into submission. Every act of violence only makes us stronger. Every death only increases our resolve. You should have left us alone. You should have ignored us as we explored the stars in peace, but you chose war. And now you will learn what that means. Threk recovered quickly. His fleet outnumbered the starward dawn by hundreds to one. Whatever weapon the humans had built, it could not possibly destroy 800 warships. He was certain of this. He ordered his fleet to attack. The Vectari ships moved with practiced coordination. Weapons platforms locked onto the small human vessel. Fighters launched from carrier bays. Missiles streaked through space toward the starward dawn. It was the largest concentration of firepower that Dominion had ever assembled against a single target. Lisa did not try to run. She did not try to fight. She simply flew forward, straight toward the heart of the enemy formation. The first missiles hit the starward dawn's shields. Then the shields failed. Beams of energy tore through the hull. Fires broke out on multiple decks. Crew members died at their stations, still working to keep the ship moving forward. Danny Reyes took 3 hits from shrapnel and kept navigating. Beth Taylor dragged wounded crew members to escape pods, forcing them to leave, even though she refused to go herself. Paul Harrison held the weapons steady, waiting for the right moment. Lisa stayed at the helm. Her hands burned from electrical fires, her uniform stained with blood. The ship was falling apart around her. Half her crew was dead. The view screen was shattered, replaced by a jagged window into space. But they were close enough now, close enough to the center of the Vectari fleet, close enough to the planet where their people were still being held prisoner. She opened a final broadcast, transmitting to every human ship, every colony, every world where her species lived. This is Commander Lisa Morgan of the Starward Dawn. We are about to deliver justice for Horizon 4. Rescue operations are clear to proceed. Get our people out. All of them. That is our final order. She looked at Paul. He nodded once. The weapon activated. There was a moment of silence, a heartbeat of stillness before the universe changed. Then the Vectari home fleet ceased to exist. Ships did not explode or break apart. They simply dissolved, their matter losing cohesion, falling into clouds of atomic dust that scattered across space. 800 warships vanished in seconds. The orbital platforms followed, the defense stations crumbled. The space around Vectari Prime became empty except for the expanding cloud of what had once been the most powerful military force in the sector. The Starward Dawn, caught at the edge of the effect, began to dissolve as well. Lisa felt the ship coming apart around her. She felt no pain. There was no time for pain. Her last thought was of the prisoners still alive, now undefended, waiting to be rescued. Her last emotion was hope. Across Vectari space, human rescue teams moved into action. Ships that had been waiting jumped to their targets. Marines landed on prison worlds and slave camps. Medics rushed to free and treat the captives. In 14 different star systems, simultaneous operations extracted every remaining human prisoner. The missions had been planned to the second, timed to begin the moment the Vectari fleet was destroyed. Lisa had ensured that her sacrifice would mean something. Her crew had given their lives to create the opening. Now it was up to others to finish the mission. On Vectari Prime itself, the population watched in shock as their fleet disappeared. For centuries, they had been the conquerors. They had taken what they wanted and destroyed anyone who resisted. Now they stood defenseless, their military gone, their allies absent, their empire crumbling. The Vectari Dominion, built over 3,000 years of conquest and cruelty, began to collapse. Conquered species rose up against their masters. Client states declared independence. Trading partners severed all ties. Within weeks, an empire that had spanned hundreds of worlds would shrink to a single planet. Surrounded by enemies it had created through generations of abuse, High Commander Threk survived the initial attack. He was on the surface of Vectari Prime when his fleet was destroyed. He watched the cloud of dust that had been 800 warships spread across the sky like a new constellation. For the first time in his long life, he understood what fear truly meant. The humans had not just defeated him. They had erased his power completely, had done the impossible, sacrificing themselves without hesitation to deliver justice. They had proven that they could not be beaten by conventional means because they did not fight by conventional rules. They fought with something the Vectari had never understood and never would. Love. Love for each other. Love for strangers. Love that burned brighter than any weapon and lasted longer than any empire. Threk would spend the rest of his life as a prisoner, forced to watch his civilization fade into history. He would never understand how he had lost, would never grasp the simple truth that the humans had shown the galaxy. Some prices are too high to pay. Some lines should never be crossed, and some species should never be underestimated. 1 month after the destruction of the Vectari home fleet, the Galactic Concord convened its largest emergency session in 1,000 years. Representatives from every major species gathered on Nexus Prime. The Great Hall, designed to hold hundreds of diplomats from across the galaxy, was filled to capacity. Everyone wanted to witness what happened next. The topic was simple: humanity. For days, the debates raged. Some species called for preemptive action against the dangerous newcomers. They argued that humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, too willing to use extreme violence. If left unchecked, they might threaten the stability of the entire galaxy. Better to contain them now while they were still relatively weak. Others argued for appeasement. Humanity had proven its willingness to sacrifice everything in pursuit of vengeance. Any attack against them would trigger the same fury that had destroyed the Vectari. The safest course was to give humans whatever they wanted and hope they remained peaceful. Still others suggested careful diplomacy. Humans were clearly different from other species, but perhaps that difference could be managed. Perhaps agreements could be reached that would satisfy human needs while protecting galactic interests. Elder Vorith of the Thessari watched the debates with growing frustration. He had touched human minds. He had felt their chaos and their passion. He knew that none of these approaches would work. Humans could not be contained, appeased, or managed. They could only be understood. He requested permission to address the full assembly. "We are approaching this wrong," he said, his telepathic voice reaching every mind in the hall. "We keep trying to fit humanity into categories we understand. We call them dangerous or irrational or unpredictable. But we miss the essential truth about them." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans are bound to each other in ways we cannot comprehend. They form families not just through blood but through choice. They adopt strangers into their hearts. They feel the suffering of people they have never met, as if it were their own pain. This is not weakness. This is their greatest strength. He turned to face the representatives of the military powers. You cannot defeat them through force. Every attack only makes them stronger. Every death creates more determination to fight. The Vectari killed 3,000 humans on Horizon 4. In response, humanity mobilized its entire civilization for war. They did not count the cost. They did not calculate acceptable losses. They simply refused to allow the crime to go unanswered. He turned to the diplomats. You cannot manipulate them through politics. They do not think in terms of advantage or leverage. They think in terms of right and wrong. If you harm their people, they will come for you. If you help their people, they will remember forever. They are loyal beyond reason and vengeful beyond measure. Finally, he addressed the entire assembly. The only way to deal with humanity is to treat them with respect. Do not attack their colonies. Do not take their people. Do not harm their children. If you follow these simple rules, they will be the most generous, most helpful, most peaceful species you have ever encountered. But if you break these rules, no power in the galaxy will save you from their response. The Zephyri historians presented their findings next. They had studied human history in detail, documenting every war, every conflict, every act of violence and mercy. Their conclusions supported Voroth's analysis. Humans have fought each other constantly throughout their existence, the lead historian reported. They have built terrible weapons and caused immense suffering, but they always rebuild. They always forgive. They always find ways to move forward. They have faced extinction-level events and survived through sheer determination. They are perhaps the most resilient species we have ever encountered. The historian paused, then added something that made the entire assembly fall silent. They are also the most dangerous, not because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of what drives them. When a human loves, they love completely. When they hate without limit. When they decide something is worth fighting for, they will burn the galaxy to ash before they surrender. The Vectari learned this lesson. We should all learn from their example. Ambassador Kira Santos was invited to address the council last. She had aged visibly in the month since the war began. Her hair had turned white with grief and stress. She had lost friends on Horizon 4. She had lost more friends on the Starward Dawn. She had watched her species transform from peaceful explorers into warriors of terrible power. She stood before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds and spoke simply. We did not want this war. We never wanted this war. Humanity came to the stars seeking knowledge and wonder. We wanted to meet new species, to learn from ancient civilizations, to build something beautiful among the stars. We were not looking for enemies. Her voice grew stronger. But we found enemies anyway. The Vectari decided we were weak because we were kind. They decided they could take our people and sell them as property. They decided our children were less valuable than their profits. She looked around the Great Hall, meeting the eyes of beings she had once hoped to call friends. They were wrong. And we proved them wrong in the most terrible way possible. We sacrificed our ships, our soldiers, and our peace of mind to deliver justice. We did things we never wanted to do. It became something we never wanted to be. Tears ran down her face, but her voice did not waver. Now the war is over. The prisoners are free. The Vectari Dominion is no more. And we are left to rebuild, to heal, to remember the dead. We will do all of these things. We will return to being the peaceful, curious species we were before. Her eyes hardened. Bah! But we will never forget. And we will never allow this to happen again. So here is my message to everyone in this hall too. Every species in this galaxy, leave us in peace, and we will be your best friends. Trade with us, learn with us, explore with us. We have so much to offer and so much to learn. She paused. But harm our people, and you will face the same fate as the Vectari. Not because we want vengeance, but because we cannot be otherwise. We protect our own. It is who we are. It is what we will always be. The Council voted to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Concord. The decision was unanimous. More importantly, they established a new protocol that would be taught to every spacefaring species for generations to come. It became known officially as the Santos Doctrine, but humans called it something simpler. A warning passed down through the ages, whispered in trading posts and diplomatic halls across the galaxy. Do not touch their children. Do not harm their people. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. In the years that followed, humanity built a memorial on Horizon 4. The ruins of the colony were cleared away and replaced with gardens, filled with flowers from 100 worlds. At the center stood a wall of black stone carved with the names of everyone who had died, the colonists, the prisoners, the crew of the Starward Dawn. Lisa Morgan's name was carved largest, at the very top, surrounded by the names of her crew. Paul Harrison visited every year on the anniversary. He tended the flowers planted around his daughter's name. He had never built another weapon. After the war, he resigned from his engineering post and spent his remaining years designing parks, gardens, and places of beauty. When people asked why, he said simply, Sophie loved flowers. Danny Ray's mother came to the memorial once, shortly after it was completed. She sat beside her son's name for hours, touching the letters carved in stone. She did not cry, she told him about the ocean, about the summers they had spent together, about how proud she was. Then she stood, touched the stone one final time, and walked away. Beth Taylor was buried somewhere else, on a small moon orbiting a distant planet. Her Marines chose the location because it had the most beautiful sunsets in human space. They visited her grave every year, telling stories about her bravery, her stubbornness, and her absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. Humanity continued to explore the stars. They made friends among the ancient races. They shared their art and music freely. They laughed easily and helped readily. They were known as a generous, curious species that was always eager to learn and quick to offer assistance. But every species knew the stories. Every species remembered what happened when the Vectari crossed the line. In quiet moments, on distant stations, alien beings would sometimes look at their human friends and wonder what lay beneath the surface. What would happen if someone hurt them? What would they become? They never found out because they never made that mistake. The universe has many rules, written and unwritten. There are rules about physics and gravity, about trade and diplomacy, about war and peace. Most of these rules can be bent or broken under the right circumstances. Most of them have exceptions, but after the fall of the Vectari Dominion, one rule rose above all others. It was taught in schools across 1,000 worlds. It was written in diplomatic manuals and military doctrines. It was whispered by traders and travelers in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Some rules do not need to be written down. Some lessons only need to be learned once. The universe had learned its lesson. And in the vast darkness of space, humanity slept peacefully, surrounded by stars they had earned the right to call home. Do not mess with humans. It was the most important rule of all.